I think that at the end of the day, you need to be very careful not to get in love with the technology, but have a
Okay.
technology that solves a real problem.
All right, Jorge Myszne, thank you so much for joining us on 20 Minute Leaders.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So great to have you. We know each other from the J Ventures Fund, and I just love how I get to meet all these incredible people through this capitalistic kibbutz. Jorge, you have a fascinating story, I can't wait to hear on this show about your journey from Uruguay to Israel to the U.S., the startup that you sold to Qualcomm. Your amazing work at Intel and on Wi-Fi and things that I have no idea about, and finally about your new startup, which as you mentioned you're grinding on, which I love. Jorge, who are you? Give me the rundown.
Okay, so originally I was born in Uruguay in South America, and then got married and moved to Israel when I was 26, and started to work at Intel at the Wi-Fi team at Intel. When I got there, we were kind of a small startup inside Intel, so I think we were about 30 people. And then fast forward 2007, I left Intel to start my first startup, and we were about 1,500, I think, at Intel at that time on the Wi-Fi
Wow.
team. And after the Centrino and after the whole revolution of Wi-Fi, and went with other three partners, and we started Wilocity. That was a 60 gigahertz Wi-Fi chipset company. And together with that company in 2010, so I moved to the Bay Area to start the operations here in the Bay Area. And then 2014, Qualcomm acquired us, moved to
Wow. Wait,
Qualcomm.
Jorge. The transition from Uruguay to Israel, not that common. Going straight into Intel, what was that about? So you get married and you decide to just move your whole life to Israel.
Yeah, actually, so I started in Uruguay. I did my undergrad and second degree and master's degree there. And I always wanted to go to Israel and move to Israel. So I had the opportunity when I was 18 to go, and because Uruguay is in the south, so the scholar year is the opposite, right? So when I was about to start in Israel, so I already did half a year in college in Uruguay. So, it's just a bunch of excuses. Why not? But then I said, okay, well, I already started, so let's do it here, etc. So bottom line, I just finished there, and that was the next stage, the next phase when I could say, okay, that's the time. So with my current wife, so we said, okay, let's go. So actually, we got married, and a month later, we were in Israel, sleeping on eating on the floor.
Wonderful. And you joined Intel, you joined the Wi-Fi team during the Wi-Fi revolution. What was that like? Working on technologies that really shape how we interface with the world today, especially my generation.
Yeah, it was great, right? I think it was a great journey, and coming from a big company and seeing how that evolved, it it was great. So it started with kind of 1 megabit per second, and it was kind of a big revolution just to get 1 megabit per second, and then it becomes that great thing with all the operation. At some point, I was in charge of one of the generations, and we were manufacturing 50 million chipsets a year, and it was really great. And especially when Intel decided to go all in, with the Centrino and make the Wi-Fi part of the branding of the Centrino, and getting, at that time was McDonald's, getting hotspots in McDonald's, because of course you need both sides. That was great, and just going everywhere, and just the pride of going somewhere and say, that is the chip that I designed. That was pretty fun.
Amazing, amazing. Okay, and then from there you go with a few partners and you move on to Wilocity, and there you develop technology that you actually sell to Qualcomm, right?
Yeah.
And so what was that
Yeah.
like, moving from a huge corporation like Intel and going to create a startup, which is, you said, 60 gigahertz?
Yeah. So the way Wi-Fi works, it's in the bands that are free, ISM bands. So 2.4 and 5 gigahertz are bands that everybody can use them. And at some point, the FCCs of the world just took a band around 60 gigahertz and said, okay, this band is now ISM. And the reason for that is because of the size of the molecules of oxygen. So there is more absorption than even in higher frequencies. So basically, nobody wants to use it. It's not a good frequency to use because there is a lot of loss. So that's why they said, okay, you know what? Whoever wants to use it can use it. And that's where we said, okay, we need to use it for indoor, so not very long range, but because of the real estate that you have there, the bandwidth that you have there, so you can go very, very wide. That means very, very fast. So our first product was 4.6 gigabits per second.
Wow.
And today the spec goes all the way to 100 gigabits per second wirelessly.
Incredible, incredible. And then what were you doing at Qualcomm?
So when we were acquired by Qualcomm, so basically a couple of years earlier, Qualcomm acquired another company called Atheros that was the big Wi-Fi and became a big communications company, not just Wi-Fi at some point. So when they acquired Atheros, actually they became kind of the communications group inside Qualcomm. So when we were acquired, we merged into the Atheros group and basically took over the products of Wilocity inside Qualcomm and just merged into the communications team and built the whole combo of Wi-Fi and WiGig, that is the name of the 60 gigahertz technology, etc.
Wow, that's a very, very interesting. And now fast forward to today, you're acting both as an angel investor as part of J Ventures, but you're also running your own company. I'd love to hear about this tension between these two things. So on one hand, we meet on a monthly basis, before physically, now virtually, to look at different startups and different opportunities, yet you yourself are acting the same role as the entrepreneurs were evaluating. So how does that play out?
It's actually kind of funny because sometimes you are on one side of the table and others you are on the other side of the table. So you learn you learn a lot from being on both sides of the table.
Of course.
So as an entrepreneur, right, when you act as the VC, right, so you understand what they are looking for, right? So you know how to sell your pitch better on one side. On the flip side, you understand also the guy that is coming and pitching to you probably for the first, usually at J Ventures for the first time, or the first initial phases. So you try to help them, right? So I find myself a lot of times, just whether we decide to invest as a fund or myself personally, just helping them. And it happened in several cases. For example, one of the companies that we have that could have a relationship in South America. So I connected them with some companies that I know and try to get them going, right? So you appreciate much more both sides, right? And well, you use the intel that you get on both sides when you are on the other side.
100%, and I'm getting so much, insight and inspiration myself coming in as a student. I'm, and an engineer, but I'm going to be an entrepreneur, hopefully soon, and hopefully pitching to funds and angel groups like J Ventures, and I think that there's the just understanding the questions that are being asked. It's so phenomenal, and it's really humbling to see how many different things you can think of and what are the common pitfalls, and how much you can learn from every single person, like I'm learning from you through J Ventures. So it's really, really great. Chameleon, talk to me a little bit about that.
So Kameleon is the latest one. So after I took
The
some time
latest
off,
adventure.
yeah. So I took some time off after a long time that I was grinding. I took some time off, spent some time with the family. We had a great road trip across the U.S. from coast to coast. So at some point I said, okay, now it's time to go back to the trenches. So actually, I partnered with two other guys. One of them is also a guy that I work with at Wilocity, and we started Kameleon. That we are trying to solve the cybersecurity problem, but from the foundation. So there's a lot of companies working on the cyberspace, but we see that basically at the end of the day, all the software runs on top of hardware, and that hardware was never designed for security. So it's a patch on top of a patch on top of a patch. And what we see is that unless you build a strong base, doesn't matter what you build on top, at the end of the day, you can always come underneath.
Right.
So this is what we are doing, and basically Kameleon is building what we call the SPU. It's a security processing unit that is a companion device to any system, but in particular right now we are working on PCs and servers, and protect the system from time zero, so all the boot of the system, and then during runtime, and isolates completely the attackers from the defenders, and gives a very secure environment for the defenders where they can trust, and trust here is a big, big word. They can trust what they see.
Right.
They cannot be fooled, and they get full visibility on the system, how it's working and what's going on.
Is that why it's called Chameleon? Because it can change its color, and its color based on what you want it to, so that it blends with the environment?
Yeah. So one of the applications that we are also doing is what it's called moving target defense. And basically what you do is you change the memory map of the software that is running in runtime. So that's where the Kameleon is coming. We move things around. So when attacker wants to attack the system, they don't know where the entrance is, right? So you are moving the windows and the doors all the time, right? So when they try to get into the house, they don't know where to enter from.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And I have to ask, so, going from corporate to startup to corporate to now investor, what are some things that you're bringing with you into this newest venture? Because you must be approaching this with a little bit more insight, if not a lot more insight than you had before. So what are some of the key things that you and your partner set out and you knew off the bat that perhaps Jorge of Wilocity in its early days didn't know?
I think that working on both sides, on small companies and on big companies, you understand the motivations behind what people do. At the end of the day, you deal with people.
Yeah.
You do business with people, right? It doesn't matter if it's Intel, Qualcomm, Wilocity, small, big, medium, it's all the same. At the end of the day, you need to try and understand what is driving that person, what is the level of risk that it's willing to take, and why. So having worked in big companies, small companies, usually Americans, but doesn't necessarily need to be, right? You get to at least understand or recognize what are the things that drive people, what is all the internal, especially in the corporate, so the internal politics
Right.
at the corporate, and who are the right people to talk to, what is that you need to offer, find the person that can help you.
You know,
And at the
I
same,
think it's so cool that you're dealing with, you know, the very low level of technology, very hardcore technology. Yet when I ask you about the things that you're taking with you from your previous experiences, you're not saying I'm taking more knowledge and more expertise in the domain, but you're saying I'm taking the understanding that at the end it's all about people and it's all about relationships, right?
yeah, at the end of the day, I mean, if you want, even though it's still silicon and semiconductor, right? I was doing communications, now it's security, it's systems. So it's the expertise, you know, you can always find good people and build a good team. But at the end of the day, you need to know how to build the whole system, especially when you are trying to change some conventions, right? When I talk about cybersecurity, nobody thinks about hardware. Everybody thinks about software, antivirus or whatever, right? So just shifting, making that paradigm shift, it's not trivial. And at the end of the day, you need to find the right people that are willing to take that leap of faith with you and the risk, of course, right? And say, okay, we need to fix this from the foundation. We need to build the right foundation. And it's not another feature, and if it's white or black or whatever.
Right. Are there more, um, I'm trying to think of things that I would want to take for myself as I approach my own ventures later on and my own experiences in the tech industry. What are some of the earned secrets that you've accumulated over the years in terms of, the products that you're building and communicating with customers and with different people?
I think that at the end of the day, you need to be very careful not to get in love with the technology, but have a
Okay.
technology that solves a real problem.
Okay.
So the technology is the consequence and not the cause, right? So you need to be very careful. As a technical people, we always fall in love with the technology.
Of course.
But at the end of the day, when you go to a potential customer, you need to understand their pain and see how the technology solves their pain and not just, well, this is cool, right? This technology is really cool. So I think that this is probably the main thing in terms of what you do with your things and being upfront. I think it's the other one. You know, as a startup, you are always with less resources that you want, and you are always probably promising a little bit more than what you really have. And it's kind of a leap of faith also there. So while I think it's okay and it's everybody understands that, you need to be very upfront. You don't want to put your potential customers and your champions inside the company in a bad position. So you need to be very open and develop that relationship with them, so they know what they have and they can help you manage that and navigate the company. They know that better than you.
I love it. I love it. Jorge, we almost have to end, but I have to ask you my favorite question. Three words that you would use to describe yourself or that your co-founders from either startup would use to describe you as. Three words.
Three words. Adventurous. I think
Okay.
I've been going up and down, right and left, and things that I didn't know exactly how they will end. Grit.
Okay.
And it's sometimes people always ask me why I left a big corporate with a big salary, right, and go back to the trenches. But that's what I like. And the third one, I think it's citizen of the world. having lived in 3 countries now and at least 10 years on each, you get a little bit of each one with you, and you are always missing a little bit of each one.
I love it. I love it. Wonderful. Jorge, thank you so much for the inspiration and for the time. I really appreciate it. And best of luck with Kameleon.
Great. Happy to be here. Thank you.
תודה רבה. ביי ביי.
Bye.